Fun is not something one considers when reviewing an action figure, but this does put a smile on my face. Hey guys, David here with another figure review in honor of the release of the home versions of Avengers Infinity War. We just had the digital release and now we're about to get the Blu-ray and 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray releases coming up in about a week or so. We are going to be taking a look at ASH Figuarts Avengers Infinity War Thanos. I knew I needed to have a Thanos figure, but the Hot Toys one, despite being ultra realistic, was costing an arm and a leg. That, and most websites like Sideshow or Big Bad Toy Store, they were asking for a down deposit. I don't really roll like that, so I settled with the ASH Figuarts version, and I figured that this is going to go really well with my ASH Figuarts Homecoming Spider-Man. I think it'll be really true to scale, and at the same time, it'll be given opportunities for some posability and some stances and some diagrams that dioramas that I think I could have an awful lot of fun with. So let's take a look at him inside of the box, which is rather nifty. It's a big shame that BBTS packaged him in like a giant ass box, and yet the box itself is not exactly that, that abundant. It's not a huge ass thing. So I'm like, alright, that was a little bit of overkill. But here we have the box in the traditional SH Figuarts type of style. We have that promotional art of Thanos that you've been kind of seeing in an awful lot of the toys that were released around the time that the movie came out in theaters. Then we have a little bit of a Thanos-esque kind of color scheme or pattern going on right here with the framing of the window, as well as the actual figure there inside and the different accessories he comes with. Avengers Infinity War logo down at the bottom. Nothing so much at the top except for the ASH Figuarts Thanos logo there, and then the Avengers symbol there. On the right, we have a pose of him. Not so much the character, but the figure itself, as well as that logo and the Thanos name right there, Avengers. Then we rotate it to the left, to the other side, and it's pretty much the exact same thing, only without Sans Thanos. Flip over to the back, and then we have a white backdrop with a couple of images of the figure and the different poses and accessories and features he comes with, as well as a bunch of Japanese writing. And speaking of the writing, what I always get cracked up whenever I do get an ASH Figuarts figure is that you got Thanos right there. We flip it back to the front, and somehow, somewhere on the packaging, they make it clear to let you know that ASH Figuarts stands for, and let me see if I can find the description here. I think it's over here in the back in Japanese, but in the front, it's going to say ASH Figuarts Thanos with a little Infinity Gauntlet symbol right there. You can kind of see reflecting there in the light. But then right here is a description of what ASH Figuarts actually means. And it says, ASH Figuarts is a new standard figure series that incorporates the Bandai action figure art under the theme Pursuing Character Expression Through Humanoid Action. So, if they were to make an action figure of a caterpillar, how humanoid can they possibly get with that? That's my question. Also, real quick before we move on with the actual figure, I love how at the bottom you do have, the basic UPC and stuff, and over there covered up by some of these stickers. You can kind of see that there's another pose of Thanos there with the Lego. But then we have a bunch of really obvious disclaimers that always manage to crack me up. But then again, it also puts me into a depression to know that some people still don't learn. This product may contain small parts, may be harmful if swallowed. Yeah, that's gonna be one annihilated rectum. Anyways, enough about the box. It's just their standard issue ASH Figuarts box that you've kind of seen in some other figures where they kind of keep the theme of the figure and the theme of the character and the patterns going on with the packaging, which is kind of meticulous, but besides that, it's just a standard type of box. So, let's crack him open and see what the Mad Titan is all about. And now here we have ASH Figuarts Thanos from Avengers Infinity War. As you can see, he's meant to be the scale to the other figures from this line. Getting him out of the box, he has some heft to him. He actually has some presence to him. And I know that that's something kind of cliche to say now about Thanos after having seen the movie countless times, not just myself, but everybody else included, that Thanos was one of the best villains that the MCU has had. It's cool to also correlate with that this is probably one of ASH Figuarts' finest works in recent memory. Now, I'm not going to go as far as to say that I own too many ASH Figuarts figures. The only other one that I have is Spider-Man from Spider-Man Homecoming. But I can see this even still being an increase in quality, because for one, the scale has been upsized. He's a little taller than 6 inches. I think he's supposed to be at that towering scale that he's had over the other Avengers during the movie. So if you were to put the other characters such as Doctor Strange or Iron Man, or like I have right here, Spider-Man right next to him, you can clearly see the difference in scale. He will whoop his Spidey ass right there. So you can definitely see the dedication to the scale and to the size of Thanos here, both in height and in width and in almost every other dimension you could probably think of. And that is awesome. He looks amazing right next to my Spidey here, scale-wise, and I'm glad to see that they were able to keep that true to life. That is, if Thanos was a real-life character, so that's pretty cool. So let's move Spidey to the side, and now let's focus back on Thanos, because he's the man of the hour. Besides that, detail on him is also pretty good. It's not exactly the most realistic, of course, because you can only do so much with a figure of this scale. Despite being bigger than the other figures, he still is kept under this manageable, I don't want to say 6 inch because he's about 7.5 inches, but he's still supposed to be within that tier. So obviously you're not going to be able to see like the pores on the skin and stuff like that, like the level of Hot Toys or Sideshow figures do. But still, the amount of sculpt work they were able to do on the body, from his head, which is one of the most amazing heads I have seen in a while. Sure, it looks a little awkward from the back because he does have the little cutout there that I will show later why that's exactly there. Not only for the posability, but also for the switching of the heads that I'll demonstrate later. But the face is just immaculate. It's not that big of a figure, and I was actually rather taken with the detail in his face. Not so much, like I said, the pores or the textures, but it's more about the sculpt and the way that they were able to give the face the proper creases that it needed so that it can resemble, not only can it resemble Josh Brolin, but if you were to look at his other heads, which I guess I'm kind of jumping in advance here to some of the accessories, he comes with 2 interchangeable heads. And they all have the exact same kind of detail, where you have one head that is very obviously different, which is the very angry, I'm going to kill you face. He's got the neutral face, which he comes by default out of the packaging with it on. And then he's got a smiling face, or a very smug face. And to be honest, between the latter 2 faces, you really cannot see a leap in design differences, except for the very subtle smile, but you can see that it's there. So it's rather immaculate that they were able to give a couple of creases here and there to the face while still keeping true to Josh Brolin's look of the character, and still make it seem like it's a very well lifelike figure, despite being at the scale that you normally don't, you're not used to seeing this kind of facial detail, or at least facial recognition, so to speak, within a figure of this size. Moving on to the costume. Now, the costume is very accurate to the one that we had in the movie. Now, granted, this is not exactly the most detailed costume for a character like Thanos, which is, I think, one of the things that we were kind of being a little nitpicky about with the movie, where after seeing Thanos a couple of times in his full-out armor getup from Guardians of the Galaxy to the end credits stinger in Avengers Age of Ultron, we were all kind of like, oh, okay, so he's in his chillaxing clothes for the majority of Infinity War. They replicated that here very nicely. You got very good paint jobs going throughout the costume, from the gold on the top of the vest here to the blue fabric-looking material, as well as the black and other colored and grayish accents throughout the pants and the boots. And it all looks very well made, very well tailored. You do have a couple of rubber pieces here towards the waist where it kind of makes part of his tunic. But besides that, it's all very hard but also very robust plastic that feels very durable and very meaty. And I like that it's able to have this kind of weight to it. Not only that, but also the sculpture of his body is also very nice and very badass looking. Because on top of him looking like a very towering beast, you also have some really nice definition going on in the arms. You not only have these little lines going around his shoulder that is supposed to be significant of his species, I guess you could say. You can't really. I'm pretty sure some major Marvel nerd out there, a bigger Marvel nerd than me, will point out exactly what type of species Thanos exactly is and where he hails from. I know he hails from Titan, the what is it, the moon. Is it a Saturn moon or is it Jupiter moon? I can't remember, but I know that that's where he grew up, but I don't exactly know where he was born of. But he's an alien species, and one of the resembling characteristics, besides the very iconic ballsack looking chin, is also these little creases in his shoulders, and they replicated that here very nicely, along with some really swole looking definition going on there in the arms, where, yeah, Thanos be lifted. Thanos is definitely lifting, and it very much shows, not only in the movie, but also in this figure. And it's very cool that they were able to bring that here. Besides that, I will admit that his heftiness can prove a little daunting on the legs. I don't know if it's maybe just me, but he does have a couple of balancing issues, but they're not exactly very frequent. In fact, they're rather scarce, and they make up for just most of my nitpicks for the figures, that sometimes balancing him just right is somewhat of a challenge. But that's, of course, if you manage to get him in the right pose, which is very, very inviting here in this figure. The articulation is as good as you can get with Thanos. I know that they got really in-depth with the articulation of characters such as Spidey, because he's supposed to be a very agile figure. But with Thanos, he's meant to be a very hulking tank sort of character, so it was kind of understandable that they didn't give him the best articulation, but they put it in the places that it counts, especially for those poses to kind of complement the detail they put on the figure. For one, he has two joints in the neck, one at the very top so that he can have his head tilt up about that far, and then forward about that far, as well as turning 360 degrees. Which is kind of obvious when you really think about it, because, hey, he is going to be able to switch from one head to the next. He also has, woohoo, he's been doing the splits right there. It's not time for dance here. He's got a second joint actually at the bottom of the neck that allows him to tilt even forward down like that, even much more down, and then a little bit back, but not so much. In order to tilt his head all the way back, you need to utilize the top joint. But there is a bottom joint to give him a little bit more mobility in the neck. Then, something somewhat of a staple for SH Figuarts figures would be the shoulder joints, where he's got not one, but two joints. One of them is like a little hidden type of push in, push out joint, where you can kind of extend the arms thusly. So he's got these shoulder pieces here that kind of extend, that not only make up part of his costume, but if you want to make him look a little more hulky, like I said, and make him a little bit more intimidating, you can kind of pull out the shoulders like so and kind of extend the shoulders. So it's cool that he's got some, I guess you could say, some shrugging motion going on right there, but it is, like I said, something that I've seen in some other figures, such as the Spidey one here, even though they're much more robust and much more hefty feeling in the Thanos figures than they did in the Spider-Man one, because in the Spider-Man one, I will admit that there were a couple of times I would be afraid to break it. So with Thanos, he definitely feels like these things are not going to come off anytime soon. Besides that, you also got the routine shoulder joint that allows the shoulder to rotate 360 degrees up and down, as well as move inwards and outwards, left and right, and also kind of move upwards like that. You also have what appears to be two joints in the elbow, but he can only bend one of them really, unless I haven't discovered one of these joints to be able to move. It does, yeah, okay, so the second joint does move, but just ever so slightly. It's mainly the lower forearm joint that allows him to make like this elbow bending motion. Besides that, that second one doesn't really do much for it. So I'm like, okay, yeah, the necessity of that joint is a little questionable, I guess you could say. Then he's got a ball joint here in the wrist that allows mobility 360 degrees, as well as some inwards and outwards movement. You just got to get in the right spot, because it is vertical in one direction, in one like plane, so you do have to find that sweet spot where you can actually, there you go, kind of twist the wrist upwards and downwards like that. Same exact thing with the other arm that houses the infamous Infinity Gauntlet, which, speaking of the detail, this is actually one of my favorite parts of the figure when it comes to detail, because they replicated this thing to a T. The only thing that kind of catches me off guard ever so often is the dividing wrist joint to be able to move the hand. Since it is a small figure, they weren't able to include so many like pieces in the middle to kind of move the way that the gauntlet moves, so there is a separation there that looks kind of awkward in some places, especially when I showcase a little added extra that they threw into this gauntlet hand, and that is that it has the ball joint be extendable like so. I know, kind of weird, but there's a reason for that, and that's so that Thanos can do some of his famous poses showcasing how badass his gauntlet is. So if you want to give him that, like, that ultimate power type of look, you can do so like that. Since the gauntlet is thickly, I guess you could say kind of thickly designed, more so than his regular non-gauntlet hand, bending it like so is a little limited, so they threw in an extendable wrist joint that can do that. So kind of cool, and I guess from certain angles he does look kind of nice with it, so that it kind of gives more so to the pose, but if you don't want to use it, that is just fine. He does have two joints here in the wrist, one that allows it for the ab crunch, and he can also crunch left to right. Now, turning is a little stiff. In fact, you can hear the squeaking there, limiting the motion, and it's weird because it is two separate pieces, but they are very, very sticky that I really do not want to press it too hard, so we're just going to leave it at that. Then he's got the two traditional ball joints at the top of the leg that allows it to move upwards and downwards, and then left and right, as well as the other one. The only other thing that's also kind of interesting about these leg joints, similar to the Infinity Gauntlet wrist joint that I showed here that can extend, so can the legs. And that's kind of weird, but okay, I'll take it. You can take the legs, pull them, and kind of extend them a little more. So you can see right here that there is a slight separation going on between that leg and the top of his waist there. And again, I can imagine that they threw this in for some other poses so that he can kind of split his legs out a little farther so that you can kind of give him that intimidating attack pose. But I digress. Then, once again, similar to the elbows, it kind of looks like he's got two joints in the knee, but it only looks like it really bends at one. So, I think that's rather weird. You can see right there, bends at the knee, seemingly from one joint, but I might be wrong. But it looks like he's got two joints, but only really using one. So, unless I discover something, I guess that top one allows a little bit of swiveling from left to right, but nothing too significant, in my opinion. Besides that, the entire boot is one giant piece. Again, nicely detailed, but you're going to have to deal with the limited mobility there. We only really get a joint down at the ankle that allows the foot to move up and down thusly. Not a whole lot, but you can kind of see it moving around right there. And slightly, and I mean really slightly, pivot left and right. And of course, he does have the footsies, or the toesies, I should say. Does have a toe joint right there at the tip. There you go. So, like I said, articulation, not all over the place like it does with a character like Spidey, but this is motherfucking Thanos. He doesn't necessarily need it, except to show the Avengers that he means business. And of course, some of the simplest poses are the ones that are gonna do that just fine. And let's see if we could put him in a pretty decent pose. Okay, I'll take that right there. So now let's talk about his accessories. Most of them are simply just bodily accessories, as I like to call them. And granted, again, a character like Thanos doesn't really require a whole lot of other stuff. The two that I've already discussed is, of course, his alternate heads. They're very simple to put on. You just tug a little bit on the original head, pull it. See that ball joint? See that hole? You do the math. Sometimes it can get a little tricky, but with the right amount of pressure, There we go. You hear that little popping noise, and then boom. And I'm so glad I randomly chose which head I was gonna put on, and I'm glad I put the smiling head. There we go. That looks nice. Very nice. There we go. Alrighty. So those are 2 of his accessories. The other accessories are literally just hands, but of course, Thanos doesn't have any ordinary hands. So he's got the non-gloved hand. As you can see right there, he's got fists on both the gauntlet hand and the non-gauntlet hand. Along with those hands, he does come with non-gloved hand accessories. One is a very simple, by the book, open hand. As you can see right there. You can already kind of imagine how it's going to look like with that. You got a, like, crunched hand. It's not obviously close-fisted, but it is semi-closed to kind of show his turmoil, I guess, or his despair after acquiring the Soul Stone. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. And then lastly, something I was not expecting in the slightest, but I'm so glad that they threw it in because this is a whole lot of fun, is a finger snapping hand right there. So that's actually going to be the one that I'm going to pose him with here. Going to remove his... oh wow, it actually fell on my computer. Alrighty. There's the fist hand, removing it. Just like the head, comes off the ball joint, and you just got to fit in the other one until it pops in. There we go. And that's awkward. Alright. Yeah. So you can literally just look at this picture here, this pose, and just imagine Thanos kicking things off with Queen to play Killer Queen. You know how that song starts? She keeps moving it. Yeah. So just imagine that. I put that into your heads. You can now not unsee it. And then lastly, he's got, of course, 2 extra Infinity Gauntlet hands. One of them is the open one, and then the other one is that crunching one. I'm going to show him off with the crunching one since I think we've already seen him plenty with the fist one. Of course, to remove this one, you will be tugging on that wrist joint and extending it, but fret not. It's just all part of the process. You just take this one, pop it in, like the other one, and there you go. A little, I don't want to say disappointed, because it wasn't until I discovered that he had these hand accessories that I actually ended up disappointed. If I had not known, I wouldn't have been upset. But I do kind of wish they would have thrown in at least one more gloved hand or Infinity Gauntlet hand, because it kind of bugs my OCD that they threw in 3 more hands on top of the one that he already had. But then with the Infinity Gauntlet hand, they only threw in 2 more instead of the 3. So it's like, okay, 3 gauntlet hands, 4 non-gloved hands. It's like, okay, where's that extra one? And of course, I really don't know if I should say this, but that extra hand, that extra gloved hand they could have thrown in would have been, just like this one, a finger snapping hand, but with the gauntlet. I guess maybe that was considered possibly, maybe just a tiny bit spoilery. But I digress. I think enough people have seen the movie by now to kind of guess where we end up with in Infinity War. But that's Thanos, and I'm actually really, really pleased with this figure. In fact, I'll go as far as to say that maybe I like him just a notch, a tiny little notch, just a tiny bit more than Spidey. But that's not so much in a character differential, but more so in a figure differential amongst the Figuarts figures that I actually do own, especially out of the Marvel line. The other characters, I don't know if I'm going to acquire him, but I'm really, really glad that I decided to stick with Thanos, because I really wanted a Thanos figure, especially for the awesome character he ended up being. And I'm actually pleasantly surprised with the amount of detail and color and scale they were able to apply, even to a figure of this kind of, like I said, tier. Because even though he's not exactly 6 inches himself, he fits in with those 6-inch figures to scale and kind of fits right at home, while at the same time giving us that quality that Bandai Namco is used to with their SH Figuarts line, mainly in the face that I just cannot get enough of, especially with some still photography that I might show in this video, but I haven't decided just yet. Maybe you'll see it, maybe you won't, but I'm glad I got this figure. I really am glad. Sure, you know, the price point could be a little steep when you see it online, but if you were as big of a fan of Infinity War, and most especially Thanos as I was, then you will not be disappointed going with this figure, especially if you're already familiar with the quality that Bandai Namco kind of gives with their SH Figuarts line. So I'm going to be giving Thanos from Infinity War, the Infinity War line of SH Figuarts, a very, very high 8 out of 10. I would have given it a 9 if they have at least thrown in a finger-snapping gloved hand. That would have been dope. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and share this video to show support to it. And of course, subscribe to the channel to catch more figure reviews and reviews and videos in general coming very soon. Also, please let me know what you guys thought of the review. Would you guys be willing to pick this guy up? Please let me know in the comments. And until next time, guys, see you later. That is, if you're still here after the finger snap. Half of you, at least. So, if half of you survive, then I would say double click like on this video. Watch this video twice. I think that's like the right thing to do. I don't know if at this point they managed to incorporate mocap, but the way they run, or the way it's like they didn't get the proper people to interpret some of these folks. There's a couple scenes where Peter has to run and he just has like the most wimpiest run, and it just did not translate very well.
Parker! That's the third call I got about giant lizards running amok in Gramercy Park. Giant lizards! Pronto!